Tools for PHP, continuous delivery, what I'm here to talk about. My name is David Amanshia. Most websites, or by volume, the largest number of the language that serves the largest number of pages is PHP, and I think it's by quite a long way. I'm not sure what the exact statistics are. I'm pretty sure it's over 50%, and the other languages share the rest. During Zen's last AGM, they mentioned that 65% of PHP teams are struggling to find a complete DevOps solution, and but most of them realised that they should have one, and that was in November. So, implementing DevOps and CD principles for PHP environments. We'll ignore the last word. Yeah, the talk's going to focus more around the tools and the principles because they're general software engineering principles that I'm sure you guys are very, very accustomed to. So, most on the sysadmin side, a lot of sysadmins really hate PHP, and some of them really love it. For a bunch of different reasons. I guess generally the guys who like it is because it's not compiled. You can write PHP stuff and it's working 30 seconds later. There are other languages that do that, obviously, but quite a lot of admins don't have a language preference because they're not programmers. So, generally, I guess your CD setup is probably going to include these things, regardless of what language you're using and what platforms you're using. Ideally, it would probably look quite nice if it included most of these things. So tools for virtualized environment, clearly Vagrant wins. It's not in PHP, but it does try to keep configs to a minimum. So quite a lot of PHP developers kind of don't like using other languages. Probably the same with most developers. Yes, but it does. But Vagrant does keep configs to a minimum, so it's really cool for any language. There's PHP VB as well, PHP VirtualBox. It's a web interface implementation of the VirtualBox GUI, desktop GUI. So you can do quite cool scripted things with it if you know some curl or some wget, something like that. But it's not nearly as cool as Vagrant. Build servers. Jenkins is the industry standard, but it's not really aimed at PHP. So in my experience of like maybe probably 10 PHP teams and the last 6 or 7 aiming to do lots of DevOps stuff, quite a few of the PHP engineers don't like Jenkins because they can't change it. I mean, it takes there are a lot of plugins for Jenkins, which is very good, but a lot of developers like to write their own stuff if they have an issue. PHP CI, it's quite new, very slick design. Your PHP devs can shape it for you and create UV extensions that you need. But the bad point is that it could do with way more extensions. I think they're like 20 or 15 or something. ThoughtWorks Go. I love ThoughtWorks Go personally, but most of the PHP environments that I've encountered that are using Go are really enterprise. So, like, as in, we've got more than 20 PHP engineers, like that kind of thing, the ops team, that kind of stuff, because it is a bit of a behemoth. Okay, testing platforms. Behat and Mink is the PHP version of Cucumber. If you guys, if your dev teams are not doing front-end testing, it's a really low barrier to entry, low effort to entry to use it. PHP Unit, again, is the PHP version of XUnit or JUnit, and there are quite a few analyzers as well. The ones I mentioned here are PHPCS and PHPMD. Probably PHP CPD is pretty good as well. I think these first two are based on Java tools. I'm pretty sure PMD is a well-known Java tool. My DevOps experience is mostly for PHP and Ruby apps, so I haven't done a huge amount with the Java ones. Oops, I think I've done 2. Source Labs. If you guys are working with big web apps, you should love Source Labs because they will let you run your tests really, really quickly. They'll give you Selenium grids that are on performance infrastructure and managed. So it's probably quicker to let them set up your Selenium grid than it is to create one yourself, unless you work in a company that is so enterprise or you're working on something really secret. And webpagetest.org, not just for PHP, but for any web application, it can give you a huge amount of analytics in like 5 seconds on any page. In fact, that works for any page on the internet. They've got at that address, you can just go in, type in any website, and they'll give you analytics on that website in about 10 seconds. You can also download and host it as well to make it so you can run it with more performance or in a cluster. Deployment tools. Capistrano is obviously not written in PHP, but it's really cool. Like most of the industry likes it. Rocketeer has all of the commands of Capistrano, but it's in PHP. So the PHP devs that I've seen use it really liked it. A million FTP script. If you're doing this, you should stop. I can explain why afterwards if you would like. Oops. Frameworks. Now, some of the PHP frameworks are really big. Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress, between the three of them, serve 10% of the pages on all of the internet, or all of the web. So they're pretty important to web DevOps. Drupal has drush, which stands for the Drupal shell. It's a bunch of tools that will allow you to do cool things in an automated way on your Drupal sites. Joomla has JRush, similar principle. Symfony has the console, which is really good because it allows your developers within their application to create command line tools like out of the box for DevOps kind of actions to be performed upon the application. Laravel, which are probably the fastest growing PHP framework at the moment, they created a vagrant virtual machine called Homestead, and it's had 500,000 downloads in I think 6 months. It's got like it's got a nice quality setup for Laravel developers to use, and it's got the chef configuration in the package that you can deploy in other places or change that kind of stuff. Data as code. Clearly, massive SQL dumps can be pretty tricky. I'm sure we've all deployed quite a few of them, and I've myself broken enough to realise I don't like doing that. Because the larger it is, the less portable it becomes. I mean, deploying a 1 megabyte SQL dump to production sounds terrible. Yes, Drupal has a module called Features that allows you to. It's kind of a query builder. That focuses specifically on the entities within Drupal and will allow you to create small data sets that can change the structure of your application through code in deployment. They change the structure of your database through code in deployment. Symfony, Laravel, and Zend all use Doctrine, which is an object relational management system. So they do use. You can pick any backend like database, like MySQL, Postgres, or whatever. But the only interactions that the application has with the database are all through code, so that they can be codified and wrapped up really easily. Doctrine's pretty good for that, actually. Joomla has JFeatures, which is a query builder. From my personal experience, out of all of those, data as code is probably the most consistently problematic, because broken databases in a web app probably mean it's the kind of red flag that might mean you have downtime. If you break the database, break your database structure, you probably have downtime after that point. And it's also quite hard to roll back relational database changes generally. Opportunities that hopefully you can take from this. The opportunities I'll go for are the web server based ones. Most PHP setups are running on PHP 5 and Apache 2 point something, like 90%, probably over 90%. But it also runs on HHVM, which is a virtual machine that Facebook have written, and in fact all of Facebook's like PHP, which is all of their front end sites, are running on HHVM and not on PHP servers. It's really, really fast. It's a virtual machine for PHP. Zend server as well, which is a server made by Zend who make PHP. It's well supported and also pretty performant, and it scales well. And there's also PHP implementations to run it in the JVM, which are kind of probably may not be as good as Facebook's HHVM, I imagine. I've seen a couple of them, but they can all have significant performance improvements, for your application. And you can give your devs the freedom to try this stuff out for you and tell you how it works, so that you don't have to do it all to get those improvements. Thank you for listening. You guys can find me here in these places, and actually I think it is questions. Yes.
Much of the problems you described are not to do with PHP per se, but to do with the fact that most CMS frameworks scatter code, config and content liberally between file systems and database, which is a complete nightmare. That's not a specific issue about PHP. It's just most of them have ended up being written in PHP.
Oh, in fact, I've already got a mic, so I don't need that. Right. I agree with what you've just said. One of the reasons, actually, that a lot of sysadmins don't like PHP is because you can code your PHP terribly if you want to. Yes, yes. And an example of that is the one you've just mentioned, that Drupal, Joomla and WordPress, 10% of the internet, but still, in some ways, very bad software design. But it's difficult to ignore. It would be nice if we could write all of our apps perfectly. We can't. I can, but not everyone can.
The other problem is that PHP seems to have as a design goal, every time you have a major step release, you break loads and loads of things from the last release.
This is true, actually, and it's quite annoying. Thinking back to something that Rasmus said about it, the guy who created PHP, was that problems like that he wishes he'd solved when there were 3,000 PHP sites. Now that there are 3 million, there's not much he can do about it. Unfortunately, he could change it, but he would break millions of websites. It would involve breaking millions of websites to try and unify things. So, well, it's unfortunate. Yes, indeed.
So I just want to say, great talk, and I'm really glad that you come and talk about PHP, because, so as an agency here at Friday, our go-to language is Ruby, okay, and we're all kind of Ruby heads and all that and the rest of it. And we're also doing a lot of Node work, but we'll come into, so we've just done a big thing where we came in, it was a big Drupal side. It's like, okay, you need to make this thing work, and you need to make it work in short order within the existing constraints. And what we did, we didn't change any of the languages, but we brought principles, architectural principles and delivery principles that are completely language agnostic to bear on it. I think what you said in your talk here is, regardless of the language, take it back to the kind of how you approach the work and make that work there. So as you say, a huge amount of the internet is PHP and its frameworks that may have kind of fundamental architectural flaws, but if you come to it with a mindset of like, okay, how do I work on top of this? I'm not going to do a kind of scorched earth, start from the ground up, do everything myself. I'm going to work within the constraints, I'm going to work with what's there, and I'm going to make it happen. And I think it's a really good thing. It's refreshing to hear somebody say, okay, these are the things that are there, we're going to work to make it better, we're going to level up despite of, not because of what's there. So I think I applaud you for your talk.
Thank you. Nice.
I don't have much experience with PHP, but I was wondering if you've got any views on what to use for packaging to support build promotion. Like you'd have Python eggs, Ruby gems, Java jars.
Yes.
Is there something equivalent in PHP without going up to an RPM or targz?
There are a couple. With PHP 5, it's now on PHP 5.6, but with PHP 5.4 and above, far files were released, which is a PHP implementation of jars. They're pretty good. There's another kind of dependency management called Composer, but it is dependency management. So you just provide your composer.json file and a bunch of Git repos or SVN places, and it will build your application from the JSON file. Yes. Actually, Symfony has Composer integration out of the box. So if there's any of the frameworks there that's like most DevOps friendly, it's probably Symfony.
Okay. David, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys.